Well, getting back to our top story then, 3 sources tell the New York Times that Donald Trump is flouting his lawyer's advice and pushing for an interview with Robert Mueller in the hope that it will clear him. The Washington Post reports that Special Counsel Robert Mueller sent the White House a letter on Monday offering to limit the questions in order to secure a presidential interview. According to the Post, Mueller's team suggested that investigators would reduce the number of questions about potential obstruction of justice they would ask in person and instead seek some answers in written form. The special counsel's office declined to comment. The president's legal team has sought for months to narrow the questions about Trump's actions in office and set conditions for an interview. The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, said that the president discussed the latest response on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, which would have been around the time he sent those tweets. According to Giuliani, there was slight movement, not enough to answer the concerns, but enough at least to continue at least discussing for a short while longer.
So, Clint, it's obvious Donald Trump's lawyers have no confidence in him. They don't think he's smart enough to sit across the table.
They're scared he's going to spew out something
with
stupid.
Robert Mueller. They think he's too dumb to do it. I'd be insulted if I were him, but he can hire the lawyers he wants to hire. What's at risk for Donald Trump if he sits down with Mueller?
Well, they're looking at this strategy now where I think at first it seemed, oh, it'd be great if I can submit written answers first before I go in. But what written answers can do is it can put Donald Trump in a tough spot because he has to be able to attest to those answers. We know he doesn't like to read a whole lot. The second part of it is he will have to answer follow-up questions based off those written answers. That's another dangerous situation for President Trump to walk into. And the other thing is they don't know what everyone else has texted, emailed, communicated, and what they've said when they've gone into the Mueller team.
Right.
The president will be the last interview, pretty much, of this obstruction case. So if the timeline doesn't match up, if they show up in person and say, well, we have this message that came from one of the people in your circles, and this is what it said, this puts the president in a really tough spot, and he will have to answer follow-up questions. So even if he goes in with a game plan, that game plan is going to go awry pretty quick.
You have to tell the truth.
Jonathan, what's your reporting telling you from the White House yesterday? Donald Trump, obviously, in meltdown mode. What's going on?
So there are 2 things. First, on the interview, I mean, Trump himself is a singular voice in terms of advocating to do this. No one around him thinks he should, not just his attorneys, but his closest advisors think this is just a real trap situation where he would get himself into a lot of trouble. What we saw yesterday, and we should remember, just to put it very bluntly, to call the nation's top law enforcement officer, Jeff Sessions, and ask him to end this probe, even though, of course, Sessions has recused himself. But certainly the mechanism would be there to end this if he wanted to.
Again, that is more obstruction of justice in plain sight.
This comes after just days of reporting about how we know that the Mueller team is examining Trump's tweets as exhibits possible evidence of obstruction, that not just to be looking at what he says behind closed doors, but what he is saying out there in public. And Trump, of course, being so transparent, does that quite a bit. But we're also reporting...
And by the way, I just want to say, we were talking about this with somebody yesterday, and they said, well, is it a crime if he does it all in public? I said, well, yeah, if I walk into a bank and it's the middle of the day and there are 30 armed guards around and I stick a gun up and say, give me your money, that's still a crime.
Right.
Even if I'm acting in a stupid, obvious way, that is still a crime. The fact that he continues to try to obstruct justice in public, doing things that would have any other governors or mayors thrown in jail immediately, that doesn't lessen the impact that he's attempting to obstruct justice in the light of day.
It's how it's being received. There seems like the impact would be greater if it was uncovered in an email or a text message rather than wide open for his 53 million Twitter followers to read. In terms of what's been happening behind the scenes, according to our reporting, it's a confluence of events. There's certainly a lot of this Mueller pressure right now with the interview going on. We know yesterday morning he was watching the news coverage of the Paul Manafort trial, that he sees this as a significant step. That as much as he downplays publicly what Manafort did for him in the campaign, he knows. He was the campaign chairman for months. He ran that convention. This is the closest this has come to him, to the White House, to his family, even if these charges specifically aren't about Russia. And we have also seen him, according to our reporting, talking to advisors during the night over the last week, just sort of furious about how the media has covered this. Not just the Mueller probe, not just the Manafort thing, but also the coverage of the Helsinki summit, the coverage of how he's beholden to Russia, and that he just feels like it is both the government, Jeff Sessions being his favorite whipping boy, and the media conspiring against him.
And the Manafort trial makes it all very real.
Yes.
It's on
It
TV,
does.
it's happening.
Yeah.
He's
Yes.
watching this.
Yes.
He's,
He's watching it
he's
yesterday.
seeing mug shots and testimony and cross-examining.
Real things.
It's all happening.
And Joe, as a lawyer, you know that the tweet yesterday about, end this now, gets to something that prosecutors love to get to, his state of mind.
State of mind. And boy, you can trace that all the way back to his White House meeting where he kicked out all Americans and only had Russians in there.
Yeah.
And he's saying, I fired Comey, and now the pressure's off of us. I mean, it's pretty remarkable that, again, he calls it a witch hunt. And I would just say, again, for any cable news outlet that refers to it as a witch hunt, for any congressman that refers to it as a witch hunt, for any talk show host that refers it to a witch hunt, you are doing Vladimir Putin's bidding. You just are, because that, quote, witch hunt actually has evidence that the United States military and the United States intel agencies picked up on in black and white forensic evidence. So understand, you're no longer doing the bidding of Donald Trump. You're doing the bidding of an ex-KGB agent who is now one of America's toughest enemies abroad. You are aiding and abetting the enemy if you call it a witch hunt. It's that simple.
You know what? Yesterday at the White House, maybe not for the first time, but consistently, Sarah Sanders referring to the special counsel's investigation as the witch hunt,
Wow.
in shorthand,
She's
as
really...
official statement from the White House podium.
Can you imagine? This is like, can you imagine? I just can't imagine any time in our past where the United States military, people at Fort Meade, the United States intel agencies discover that a hostile power is waging some form of war on the United States of America. And elected officials and Sarah Huckabee Sanders and cable news hosts are attacking that investigation and demanding, okay, we just found out that, yes, they are trying to undermine American democracy. We now demand that you close that investigation right when we start getting evidence that Russia, we've got the hard evidence. Why don't they want us to find out what else Vladimir Putin's done?
Right, we had Facebook coming out this week talking about more intrusions for 2018. We had a story from the Wall Street Journal last week about Russians getting into the power grid. They just keep coming. And so to call it a witch hunt and to step back from it seems to me to be an abdication and a dereliction of duty.
You're aiding and abetting the enemy.
Well, let's see now.
Literally.
Speaking
So
of
how will Senate Republicans react to a tweet from the President of the United States that reads, Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now before it continues to stain our country any further? Here's the reaction from Republicans.
The president's tweet is unfortunate. I think it's inappropriate for him to be commenting on an ongoing investigation.
I don't think General Sessions can fire Mr. Mueller. I think he's recused.
Should the president be sending these tweets out?
You have to ask the president.
I think that's out of Jeff Sessions' hands. He's recused himself from the Russian investigation because he participated in the campaign, as we all know, and I think that was appropriate for him to do so.
Mueller's going to finish his investigation. The truth is all going to come out, and that's the best thing that could happen for the president and for the country.
So, Heidi, is that consistent with what you're hearing on Capitol Hill? Not exactly full-throated condemnations of the president's tweet, more stating the fact that General Sessions has, in fact, recused himself in all this. What is the feeling on Capitol Hill when the cameras are off?
It's consistent with what I'm hearing, Willie, but I am so glad that you played that, because the question right now is, how has this sentiment changed over the course of this investigation? So I went back and looked, because we have a great comparison here. Exactly about this time last year, Trump was also beating up on Sessions. And I pulled up an article from August 3rd of 2017, and here was the response from Congress. Quote, the blowback from Congress to Trump's public criticism of Sessions was sharp and substantial. and his allies in the GOP told the president to back off. What we saw was 2 separate bipartisan bills were introduced in order to send a message to the president, a shot across the bow, not to even think about taking any moves on the special counsel or on Jeff Sessions. Senator Grassley, who was the head of the Judiciary Committee, said under no circumstances will we be holding hearings over the break in order to confirm a new nominee. And so I just want to put that out there to contrast how much things have changed in terms of the sentiment in Congress since last year, when the exact same thing happened in terms of the president's attacks on Sessions.
You're just saying far more muted yesterday, saying that he can't fire Sessions, but not much more than that.
They separated themselves a bit.
Yeah, it's far more muted now. There's kind of a downplaying of the president's comments, a discounting of them, an assumption that this investigation will go forward, and just don't ask me about it.
So, Jonathan,
discounting.
A discounting of it, where they're just trying to push it away.
Just
but
cast
Jonathan,
him away.
Behind the scenes, the Senate Republicans at least are sending, and Paul Ryan also, are sending a message to Donald Trump saying, "Don't do it, right? Don't cross the line. This is a step too far."
Yes, just because it would be disastrous, not just because it would prompt a constitutional crisis, but it also could be disastrous for the Republican Party going into these midterms. That they are very concerned that if the president were to act, if he were to take those steps to eventually end this probe, to bring it to a conclusion before Mueller reports his findings to Congress, that it would be a disaster for Republicans going into November. And yes, publicly we're seeing what they're doing there. They're always afraid to fully defy this president. They know how popular he remains among Republicans, but they're finding a way to do it, and they're focusing on the Sessions argument here that, hey, look, he's not the one who can do it anyway because he's been recused. Behind the scenes, they are communicating to the White House, like, look, this is a step too far. Don't do this.
Clint, follow up on exactly what the White House calling this investigation a witch hunt means for Vladimir Putin. Talk about what a danger this investigation remains for Vladimir Putin. Talk about how exposed Robert Mueller, with the help of the United States military and the United States intel community, how much we have shattered Russia's belief that they can do whatever they want with the United States of America. Explain how a Republican congressman trying to stop us in the middle of an investigation where the U.S. military, the U.S. intel communities are giving us more and more information about how Putin has attacked American democracy in the past and how he wants to attack American democracy this year and in the future. Talk about how they are doing bidding and aiding and abetting Vladimir Putin by trying to kill this investigation.
Beyond any one election or any elected official, what they always want to do is degrade democratic institutions and the elected officials that are in charge of them.
When you say that, you mean Putin, the Russians, the GRU.
And so, yeah, when you hear witch hunt coming out of the president's mouth, they say, you're right, that is a witch hunt. They can build a bond with the president and work with the president essentially as an ally to sort of thwart democratic institutions and constituent confidence that democracy is a good system of governance. This is consistent. Witch hunt, having congressmen run around with alternative intelligence and secret leaks, this destroys the ability of our institutions, of our leaders and appointed leaders to actually do their jobs. Whether it's Sessions today, it'll be somebody else tomorrow. And you see this conflict playing out for 2018. There is no plan to deal with Russian interference or any foreign interference going into 2018.
Is it fair to say that if somebody is trying to end this Russian investigation, that they are doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin?
Yes, there should be.
Is there any question that if a member of Congress is trying to stop this Russian investigation that's already revealed so much, that they are doing Vladimir Putin's bidding?
Not only by trying to stop it, if they were successful, this would create massive turmoil in this country. That's what the Kremlin would want. And just continuing this discussion extends the length of the investigation. Every day the investigation goes on is another victory for Vladimir Putin.
All right, still ahead on Morning Joe. It's not just the Russia probe that the president is interested in shutting down. It's also the federal government. What he just said about that possibility and why he thinks it will be a good thing for Republicans and why he might need to finally go to sleep. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.